You. All right, good evening, everybody. This is the tri-board meeting of the Millis Finance Committee, the Select Board, and the School Committee. I am Pete Berube. I'm chair of the Finance Committee, and I'm going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order, and we'll pass it over to the others to do the same for their board committee.
Okay. I'm Erin Underhill, Chair of the Select Board, and with me I have Craig Schultz, the Vice Chair, and Ellen Rosenfeld, our Clerk, and I call our meeting to order for Thursday, December 15th.
Stephen Catalano, Chair of the School Committee. With me is Denise Gibbons and Mark Conroy, and I call the School Committee into order.
Okay. Thank you very much. We do have, looks like maybe a couple people attending via Zoom, a few people in the audience. Just as way of introduction, the tri-boards hold a few of these, 2 to 3 of these a year, ideally, and it's really just an exchange of ideas. Nothing's binding, no decisions will be made. The committee chairs put together some topics that we would like to hear from one another and discuss so that we can start the budget cycle and discuss some long-range strategic things for the town periodically, and we're not going to set. It should be no attempt for any of the committees, especially. I think I speak for the Finance Committee. Our intent here is not to set agendas or priorities for the other boards and committees. We may have feelings on some of the issues, and we may present those or discuss those, but nothing here that we're going to speak about is not going to change. We're not going to change any of the standard processes, which is we are independent boards and committees, and we'll go through the standard process during the year, whether it be budget cycle or other initiatives that the town has facing it. So I just wanted to, kind of set the stage for that. I appreciate everybody's attendance and really for the other committees, the Select Board and the School Board, for participating and being willing to collaborate with us, and we look forward to it. So, Ms. Underhill, I defer to you for any opening remarks.
I couldn't have said it better myself, so thank you. Yes, we're here to collaborate and to discuss some mutually agreeable topics that we've put together. And it's all for the purposes of informing each other. As Mr. Berube said, I don't expect any policy changes or anything to be made at this kind of a meeting, but we will be able to get together and discuss all these topics that we've put together.
I look forward to tonight's meeting. We have a big agenda, so let's get going.
Okay. You got it. You got it. Okay, so first on the agenda, since you said that, Mr. Catalano, is SPED funding. And ideally, the intent was to kind of get an update on the budget outlook for SPED and circuit breaker funding, and whether we forecast or project any shortfalls going into the FY24 cycle.
Sure. So we have had several conversations over the course of the last few weeks. I will be clear and concise. Our budget outlook for FY24 is very grim. Right now, we are looking in fact, as of yesterday, we had 2 new students possibly moving in, changing our calculation. So we don't have any permanent numbers, but we started our FY24 budget process the other night. I will fast forward to what we believe is the deficit facing us as we approach FY24. It's $1.4 million. $1 million of that is directly related to SPED education increases. And in fact, almost all of the out-of-district tuitions that we are paying, the collaboratives are raising their rates by 14.1%. There's 1 or 2 that potentially is only going to be going up 10%, but those numbers have not been set in stone. And as of yesterday, 2 students have moved into the districts that may be going out of district. We don't know. There's a process, a very prescribed process that we have to go through to determine IEPs and placement. So even as we try to establish numbers, they're in flux. Obviously, at some point in the budget process, we have to determine what our numbers are going to be. And just to be clear, and I think everyone in the room is aware of this, when we discuss SPED education, these are mandates, these are obligations, they are not voluntary. It is very prescriptive. Once an IEP is set, an IEP can fluctuate, it can go to, I'm not going to use the correct terms, it can either decrease or increase. At this point in time, the biggest driver of our deficit going into FY24 would be the $1 million in tuition, and there's also part of that is van drivers and new vans because of the increase in population. Some of these IEPs require in where the schools are, sometimes you can only put one student in a van, right? And sometimes it's very prescriptive that you can't double up, it's one student. So when we talk about the increase, that is a piece that it's not optional for us. So therefore, anything that happens with the budget, that component, and this is only an increase, this is the delta for next year, there's no negotiating on that. And I'm not saying negotiating with you guys. We have to do it. It's an automatic. The other bigger driver, which accounts for a lot of the increase, I should say the increase in the deficit, is roughly about $250,000 loss in choice tuition. When a student choices into the district, we get money. We've used $5,000 as a rough number. I think technically it's about $5,600, but for the sake of just an even number, let's just say 5,000. We're losing 20 students, and then some additional where we've not allowed other students to come in. So we've lost students, and we've had to close some of the younger grades. So if we don't get them in at kindergarten or first grade, it then closes it down, and then people make choices. We're always potentially going to lose students at 7th grade when they start to go to the privates, or in 9th grade when they go to a Tri-County or a Norfolk Aggie or another private school. So right now, meeting our contractual obligations for salaries, having a significant decrease in expenditures, right? Because that's where the easiest thing to cut, but we've been cutting expenditures and not funding expenditures probably on the same as the town side for years. It's eventually going to come back to haunt us, but we've always been working at protecting staff and making sure we meet the educational mandates and obligations that we have to do by law. It doesn't look good. And so last year, the town found $361,000. I wish I was coming back here to say that our ask is for 300, and I know this is not an ask, but I wish I was saying it's 360 or anything less, because we could probably work that out within our budget process. But these numbers, although preliminary, are looking more and more like they're going to be what the numbers are, and we're hoping that as we start this process, they don't go up. We'd like to go down, but we've been working hard at this, and so SPED and choice.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Yeah. The 200, when you say, and I understand it because we've talked over times and years about this, when you say you've lost 20 kids from school choice, that's not people not selecting us. That's because we don't have the ability to take them. Is that correct?
They take them in, people are graduating.
Right, and we can't take them in because our classes are full?
We try to maintain a reasonable class size, so every year the school committee has a vote.
Yep.
We have to, by law, vote to be a choice district. And then as part of that, we then determine what grades we can accept students in. So once you get them in the kindergarten or first grade, you can generally get them through elementary school, right? And occasionally you'll have some in-grade transfers, but it's losing people and not being able to take
But
additional.
but I guess the simple question I'm asking is, we have way more kindergartners and first graders
Yes.
coming
Yes.
from Millis
Exactly, yes.
than we used to,
Yes.
because our kindergarten and first grade population is growing.
Yes. Correct.
The higher grades, less
Yeah.
kids right now, but the younger kids, there's a surge of kids coming into the Clyde Brown. Yes, that's correct.
So,
I'm
and
sorry.
so if the class size is 20 kids, just for a number that you use, we're hitting 20 kids per class with just Millis
Just Millis
students.
kids.
So that eliminates the ability to bring more
Yeah,
kids in.
we're graduating 10 or 15 choice kids.
Yeah.
So those kids are graduating, we can't backfill.
Because we don't have enough room
And
in the younger grades.
that translates into money not coming in.
Yeah.
Ken, are you finding any choice students coming into middle school or high school?
That's, it's rare.
Yeah, it's rare. I mean, it could occasionally, occasionally happens. I can't tell you definitively when the last time it happened. It's generally,
Kindergarten and first grade?
they generally come in at that age.
What'll end up happening in the upper grades is if a family moves, say they move from here to Medway, but they keep their kids in the middle schools,
Yes.
Then
they then
become
become a
choice.
choice student,
Right.
but
Otherwise, no.
We've also had a couple situations where people have moved into town, which is good, but we lose their choice. So they were choicing in.
Right.
Now they're moving in, which is good for the whole town, but we've lost that choice money. And we hate to treat students coming into the district as money, but the bottom line is we do get money for kids who are choosing to come into a high quality, get a high quality education in our schools. It's the benefit, except when we can't fill those spots, we lose that money.
I just want to also point out, the 14% increase in the tuitions is state agency approved. The state authorized the private schools to increase their tuition by 14%. So this is on top of circuit breaker inherently being an unfunded mandate.
Mark, I'm going to say you have to use the microphone. I saw him walking down the hall.
Sorry, didn't know how far reach. So I'll just backtrack. The 14% is a state agency-approved increase in tuitions. So on top of circuit breaker not being funded at what it should be, they're now allowing private special ed schools to increase their tuition by 14%. This is going to impact every town in the state. I think we as a school committee, but also the select board, and also just in general, we need to reach out to our legislators as the budget process starts, because the state has to do something to alleviate this. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to do a parallel process, because we're not gonna know anything until, we're basically walking into town meeting.
Nope.
So,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
that was kind of where I was headed with this is, I don't think this is an emergency, but I certainly think it's urgent. There's an urgent need for attention to the circuit breaker underfunding.
I don't know if I'm muted.
No different than we needed help with PFAS plants. And we solicited or had a letter writing campaign from almost all of us to our elected representatives to get the attention. And I suppose that we're there. This is 2 years in a row, and that's no small deficit.
If they're gonna be increasing fees by 14% and not earmarking a certain amount of money to cover just the delta, I mean, I don't know, as Mr. Conroy said, this is gonna impact all cities and towns across the state. I can't imagine how they think that this is something that can be overcome. But that's not gonna help us get through what we need to, but obviously, there's two conversations. The conversation amongst these three boards, and then the conversation with our elected representatives to try to get some sort of reprieve and some help. But the tuitions are going up. It's a matter of what we can get from the state.
And just for historical reference, these tuitions that are going up by 14% this year, or into next year, have been 2% in the past at the high level. So we're moving from 2 to 14, which is a significant increase. Not just to our district, but across the state.
Is it confirmed that they're definitely going up by 14%, or, oh, okay.
When is that increase effective?
Next fiscal year.
July 1. So it is an FY '24 issue, and they did at least give us a little bit of notice, not that that helps necessarily find the money, but they're not telling us in May, you know, a week before town meeting. So I wish the news was better. We're still working on these numbers, we're still working on what our preliminary budget looks like. I would love to be able to come back at some point and say, it's not 1.4, I just don't see that changing. I just hope that with the 2 students coming in, we're not looking at 1.6. I don't want to play games with IEPs, but the potential is there when we have 2 students moving in that could go on a district. And these tuitions, these fees have historically been the highest. It is not unheard of to be doing $5,000 and $6,000 a month in some of these schools. So it's not small. It's not a after-school program that's minimal. These are, some of them are very, very expensive programs.
That deficit, Steve, is that considering like a straight line circuit breaker funding or an assumed amount?
Actually includes an increase of about $100,000
From the circuit.
from.
When do we get our certified circuit breaker number?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. And,
But
but Steve, if I'm.
But it's also funded off the following year. So
Yeah,
it's
that's what I was
a
gonna
year in
say.
arrears.
Basing it on previous year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
so,
cost,
so any overage we have in 2024, any increase in sped costs wouldn't even be covered till the 2025 circuit breaker, even if they were funding it in full. So,
But we did take an extra $100,000. I'm talking loud.
yeah.
Talking loud. They can hear me. We did take an extra $100,000 from the circuit breaker to try to offset that. So the reality is it's even higher than 1.4.
And that 100,000 would relate to last year's increase.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
And we've always tried to keep a little bit of a buffer in case we have a move-in in the middle of the year. We're eating into our buffer, which we, at this point, we have to, right? Because we've always wanted to, because those are our must funds, we've always tried to keep a little bit of money in for a move-in tuition.
You mentioned some of the increased transportation costs. Is there any way of regionalizing that with other local school districts so that we can kind of share the pain?
In fact, a couple of years ago, we were actually making money from other districts because we had the transportation, we had the drivers, and we were doing a lot of work with Medway. We were doing some work with Medfield, but it really depends on that year, the amount of drivers you have and what your schedule is. Because if you have students going in other places, you've lost the ability to put 2 kids in a van or to double up on a trip. But it's always something that we're trying to look at as a way to minimize the fleet, the size of the fleet, and to capitalize on the shortage of drivers. We are no different than, they're begging for drivers all over.
How does FY '23 look?
We're gonna get through FY '23. We're gonna make it. We did some cost savings and reductions last year, and we got the 360, the extra 360. I don't know the correct term. We reduced our budget accordingly, so we will end with a balanced budget at the end of the year. We will get through this year.
Thank you.
I'm gonna make about zero attempt to try to moderate us unless some brawls break out. So if anybody has inputs, please just speak up. And
Record show, I did my 15 minutes.
you did a nice job. And that actually is my next point, is that, you know, I'm gonna try to keep us roughly on agenda so we can go home by about 9:30. If that means we stay a little later and get home by halftime, that's fine too. It's Thursday night game, who cares? Anybody else want any comments or questions on our
Yeah.
first topic, Mr. Schultz?
The only comment I'd make, and it'll be very brief, with anything that involves money, until we get revenue estimates and other costs, it's premature to make any decision. So I agree. Thank you for sharing. I don't think there's anything that can be decided at this point, but I think it's good to have on the radar screen when we get revenue estimates. we can have a serious
We weren't
discussion about it.
asking, we were just
Yep.
giving you a heads up.
I'm just putting that for all of them.
I get it.
It's my footnote.
I'd just like to, in the same vein of just throwing this out there, to keep in mind. We need to remember that there are other departments in this town that desperately need money. Now, I know that they don't have the urgency of these mandates, and I appreciate the way you express it, because you're very passionate, and everybody here believes it. These are mandates, and they need to be satisfied. Although there are no other mandates in this town, i.e. DPW needs for the roads and sidewalks, this town hall's needs for repairs and more personnel that can actually be income producing. The senior programs desperately need money. They've been pushed off for 18 years. Whatever we do, we need to be cognizant of some reallocation so that when these come up, the rest of this town doesn't suffer. And I know it's this whole argument, everybody says, well, Ellen, don't ever pit the schools against the town. I've been hearing that my whole life. Don't ever pit. I'm not pitting anything against anything. Everybody's in this town. This is Millis. Millis. Whatever's good for the schools is good for Millis. Whatever's good for Millis is good for the schools. We get that. It's a give and take. But last year with the $360,000, I went to all the budget meetings when I was campaigning. And every time somebody would come from another department and they would go in front of the select board, I remember distinctly, and I didn't know anything. I still don't know anything, but I pretend I play one well on TV. And the select board would say, well, you know, we'd like to help you out, but we had to give $360 to the schools. Well, now we're at 1.4. It doesn't look like it's going away. So we can't have that moving forward. It's not sustainable to forget these other departments, which is the rest of the town. It's not sustainable. So my plea is that what we do for one, we don't forget the rest of the departments that are in dire need. That's all.
I would just like to disagree with my colleague for one moment. Having said all those meetings, we never said that we were giving the money that would have gone to somebody else to the school. We had it sitting in roads, and we took it out of roads. So it wasn't like we took it from the Council on Aging, we didn't take it from the library, we didn't take it from the police. It was money that we would have put towards roads, and it kills me we couldn't, but we decided that the moral and legal obligation we had to the kids with special needs trumped $360,000 for roads. We still put a lot in roads, don't get me wrong. But we had $360,000 more that we took and didn't use. So it's not that we're pitting anybody against anybody, and I think the reality is everybody has needs. And this is a legally mandated and morally mandated, more importantly, need. You can't tell kids who have a $120,000, $140,000 special needs case that needs to be addressed that their parents are gonna foot the bill or we're not providing services. Even if we felt that way as people, the state wouldn't let us because that's not legal. So it's a little different than we need another librarian, and we have a $160,000 legal obligation because this child moved to our town who needs services. But anyway, yeah.
I'm curious, Mr. Duffy, I'll get to you right as soon as I ask this. And are we unique? Is Millis unique in this aspect of not having, having a deficit for this category of spending? I mean, what makes us any different than, the next town over or the 3 towns down?
I think the difference this year is this 14%. The difference this year is the 14%. That's roughly $600,000 to $700,000 of this $1 million is the tuition increase. If we're, like Steve said, we generally have, you have move-ins, you have kids move in, you have kids move out. You have, right, kids age out. Things happen. And, that's what's unique about this. But that happens everywhere. Part of other thing, I think it's smaller towns versus larger towns. Larger towns just have more
Revenue.
areas, more areas.
Services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah.
give
Yeah,
their kids
and-
in district.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is what Mark was just saying, I've seen it for years and years and years. There's been years when it's fallen by $400,000 or $500,000 because there was a group of kids that aged out. But when you're a town with 1,200 kids in the whole school system, 2 children is a huge change. Yeah, and it's a,
We
Yeah.
absorbed, this
Yeah.
year, we absorbed one student, so we had there was a situation where a student, basically was moved in. We've absorbed that in the budget this year through tapping additional circuit breaker revolving. But we've also been on a expense budget freeze of the school since the second day of school.
Yeah.
That's how we're managing things, getting through this year.
That's how we get through this year.
yeah.
But we won't be able to do that next year.
Well, hold on, I do have to moderate now, because I committed to Mr. Duffy. Mr. Duffy,
Are citizens allowed to ask questions?
please,
Thank you.
only if you're on a mic.
Thank you. Jim Duffy, Exchange Street, Millis, overtax citizen. I'd like to ask that somebody take an action item to speak to the state representatives about this.
We've already contacted the one that's still in office.
And when can we have a report back?
Today, so I mean, there's no report yet, okay?
But I mean, obviously,
We recognize that,
we have no ability to deal with this other than,
Yeah,
You can write a letter, Jim.
yeah.
I could write a check too, but I don't quite have it laying around, so.
But you
At
can
some
write
point,
a
I will have
letter.
to write a
Yeah.
check
we'll
the way
take the
things are
letter.
going, so.
Yeah. The letter
We'll
would not
do that.
hurt.
And
Yeah.
that may be what we
Yeah.
need to do, quite honestly. But
Wouldn't that be something if we got every citizen in Millis to write a letter?
I can get 5.
That would be something. You get 5?
Start.
Yeah.
I think we start a letter writing campaign.
Look, it's not gonna be
this is
ridiculous.
this is a state, I believe, with a $2 billion budget surplus.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
put it in more context, it just gets you a little bit more
I got my check.
concerned. Okay, Ms. Boyardi?
Is this 14% increase, is it salaries?
Yes.
And, whew, wow, man, I'd
So-
like a 14% increase.
No, you're in the right
So-
position, trust me.
So what we were informed is basically, a lot of these private schools during COVID, they stayed open. And in order to entice staff to come and to stay, use their CARES funding, whatever.
grant.
They use their grant money to pay for signing bonuses and raises. Now that that money is dried up, they went to the state and said, we need to raise our rates in order to keep the salaries that we bumped up. And the state said, sure, go ahead, raise your rates by 14%.
Instead of hiring other people, letting those, yeah.
Right. Or,
There- There's
so,
no people to hire. That's,
Yeah,
I mean, I've got, as I found out today, I've got half my childcare classrooms open because we can't find teachers. We got
But-
waiting lists for kids, but no teachers. And we're paying 22 to 24 bucks an hour. Nobody.
Any more questions or comments on schools? Because this is an excellent segue of finite funds revenue being applied to budget items, and that is the next item on our agenda, and that's the, I believe, HCA. Well, I want to skip ahead then. So why don't we skip down to the marijuana impact funds? We won't have a lengthy discussion on this.
Why are we
It's
skipping?
analogous, and
Oh, okay.
I thought it was
All right.
next on the list. I don't, there's no real, I was trying to segue and be real slick with it, or smooth, not slick. Really, this is a short topic, I think. I think we all have, nobody here is unaware that the resources that the town has used for and through the HCA funding has been applied to budget items like social workers and DARE officers and other items. And I'm not sure what the process is for, we've used the term informally to wean ourselves off of those host community agreement funds, but we're going to have to consider that. And I don't know what the timeline is. So really, that's the discussion that we'd like to have, and just, if people, if there are those of us that, in the room that know more about what the timeline should be, please step up to a mic and let's have a quick discussion about it.
I'm just curious what the timeline is when these funds go away. I'll amplify to the mic.
Microphone, please.
Yeah, I'm going to say it.
Okay.
The micro-
We've just started the 4th year.
We've just started the 4th year.
So with the monies that we get on the 4th year will be, we have to wait till they're certified by the state and free cash. Will be available.
FY23, she means we just FY22 or FY23? We just started.
We're in 23.
So, so for the host
Go ahead,
community,
Carol.
host community agreement, they've just started their 4th year of operation. We will see any money from the 4th year of operation won't be certified for us to available in free cash until the fall of next year. And then, so it'd be fiscal year, so the money that we have a certain amount in now, and then we'll get 2 more payments, one February and one May. Those will be certified, that's the money received in '23. That'll be certified in the fall of '23 and be available for use for our '24 budget. And depending on how much you spend, be available for part of the '25 budget. So, and then we'll have 2 more years. So you'll have money for, additional money in '25 budget, and then you'll have money available for '26 budget.
Half a year in 26?
Half a year in '26. And on that, obviously, how that money is requested is through the budget process. Individual departments put in their request for marijuana impact funds, and then it's voted on as to what will be funded based on the money that we have available. For right now, the money that we have available for the '24 budget period is $271,000 for the marijuana impact funds that will go into the '24 budget. And then in the fall, we'll have additional funding that can be applied to additional money in the '24 budget.
Okay. I'm going to interject a couple questions. Does the money expire? Can it be held, indefinitely?
I wouldn't think that the money should be held, can be held indefinitely, because we're supposed to be using it for marijuana mitigation. So based on the way there is a new law that's come out, we're doing the HCA agreement as business as usual now, because there hasn't been a definite ruling. But once this HCA runs out, then we can enter into an additional 3-year negotiated HCA if both parties are willing to do so.
That was my next question. Okay.
But the new law that was passed this year, it's still up for discussion as to whether all of the contracts that were already negotiated are grandfathered in, and they can't break those contracts. I believe that's the stand that is being taken right now.
Anybody else?
I think to sum it up, it's not a FY24 problem, and it's not an FY25 problem, but FY26 is when it's going to come back and bite us. So, yeah, that's not to say not to do something with it, but that's when it becomes a financial hit, is FY26.
So quick question on that. So do the funds have to be used 100% every year? And then is there a way to start weaning ourselves off the expenses as we approach 2026 from a budget planning standpoint?
We've been told that they have to be spent. Now, they can be spent for things that are, well, I don't think we're allowed to bank them. I mean, that's what.
That's kind of a question.
Yeah. No, we are?
Why not? It's supposed to be used for marijuana mitigation, so if we don't need the funding, then we should be able to. I think that it's more to the point that we do have services that need to be done, that this money is allowable for.
Well, just as a point of discussion, I think we ought to get a real answer on that from the state. But the funds, the 3% does not automatically, that's an arbitrary percentage that the state gave us. Those don't automatically equal our needs. So what we justify as what the funds can be allocated to could be 2%, could be 2% of sales. The 1%, why not put that in some sort of reserve fund or?
If I may address that briefly.
Please.
Right now, there's a little bit of disarray at the state level because the law that was recently passed really has a lot of gaps in it as far as the interpretation and how it's going to be administered by the Cannabis Control Commission. So we're waiting right now to determine how the Cannabis Control Commission is going to address the legislation that was recently passed. So unfortunately, until we get that clarification, your question is spot on. And I would like to know the answer to that myself. But until the CCC comes back, that's a gray area. I think that, you know, we're going to have to wait and see if they're going to allow that. We certainly can check with them on that, but they have been taking a harder line on these types of things.
Mike, can I interrupt? Sorry, Mike. That's all right. This is awkward, but I'm going to just tell you the way it is, right? Because I'm the only one in this room that knows the way it is. Right now, you have an HCA that's in place for 5 years. That was the law. You get 3% of gross sales. It's supposed to be paid for things that have resulted as an impact of my facility. Okay, there has to be an excess. So you can't pave a sidewalk, right? You can't, whatever.
Nor have we.
Nor have you. Now, what happened was there were towns that weren't as fiscally responsible as Millis, and they got into trouble, and the groups that were in those towns took them to court, and they won, and they will continue to win. So the CCC took note of that, and they created an entirely new HCA system. It's statute. Unfortunately, it is so badly written, like anything that the state or any state does, nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody knows what to do with it. The way it is written is no longer does a group like mine just send a check quarterly to the town of 3%. Towns have to bill. You would have to bill me once a year, not quarterly, once a year at my anniversary date. You have to bill me, and you show me a line item for every penny that you're billing me for. Gets better. I can appeal it. I can say, well, wait a minute, I don't remember a police officer being called on this day. I can appeal it. And we can go to court, mediation, whatever we do. It's so bad for the towns. It is so bad for the towns. So the towns are complaining, the groups are complaining, nobody knows what to do. So the CCC said, well, we know the governor signed this, but we're going to take a year. We're going to take a year. They haven't even started yet. 1 year to issue guidance. 1 year. Going to turn into 3 years. You're never going to know anything. So what's the story? A lot of groups, not me, because I love Millis, a lot of groups have already stopped paying. We're stopping to pay because you got nothing. I mean, you know, I don't want to say that, but they've stopped, and they're going to wait. Some towns have taken the approach of saying, you know what, I don't care what the governor did. We have a contract. We have a contract. I signed a contract willingly with the town of Millis. So you're gonna fulfill your current contract, which I am going to do. So I'm fulfilling the 5 years. Now, this new agreement, by the way, has an 8-year term. 3 more years you get of billing me of non-existent costs. But, okay, you get 8 years. That's where the extra 3 came in, if you're wondering. So, for right now, ComCan is going to continue the 5 years. What's it, 2 left? Did you say, Carol? 2. and probably more. I got to talk to my brothers and see what I'm doing. I didn't even read this. I should have read this before I came tonight, that we're renegotiating the HCA. Lesson learned. But I'm going to do something in line with what I've been doing. But that's where we are right now. So you're not going to learn anything, Pete.
I understand.
For at least a year, if you're lucky.
I have a follow-on question, and it is awkward, and I'm going to address my question to Ms. Johnston. The tax revenue, whether it be the gross sales for HCA or the 3% sales tax, which is perpetual, are those trending up or down, just for our planning purposes?
Those are trending down, and I project that we will receive $80,000 less this year in revenues than we received last year.
And is that probably because of the facility?
Right, exactly. So there's more competition.
The good news is that they're starting to close already, so we'll be back up. Hang tight.
Prices were down, I heard, too.
Yeah, that's true.
Are there any other facilities planning on coming into Millis? I wasn't sure if there was one.
No other retail
Okay.
facilities.
Oh, okay, so it's just the
It
retail
would-
that we get the HCA agreement with?
Yeah.
Okay.
No? Okay, sorry, hold on.
There are 2 grow facilities that have HCA's, and they're still in the process of permitting and with the state in the full process. So they've been in the pipeline for a while, about 2 years. So it's really in their hands as to, you know, how quickly theirs and the CCC and how quickly that proceeds. But our current bylaws only allow for 1 retail facility, but there are 2 grow facilities in the pipeline.
They may be ready by the 2026.
Yes, but the funds from them will be much less
Okay.
Than the retail, yeah. Yes.
That one's no longer moving forward.
Well, we have not received formal, my office hasn't received formal notice of that, but again, she may be.
Allegedly.
They're not moving forward. So that's what happened, right? I just told you what, they're closing, the one-offs are closing. The grow facilities now are seeing that there's oversaturation in this market, and they are realizing that spending $20 million on a grow facility is just not worth it. So that one is, I know for a fact, but allegorically it's not worth it.
Okay. Unless there's further comments and questions, I'm going to take us back up to town department needs, IT, DPW, et cetera. I think this was Mr. Kaczynski, I'll go to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So really, on the municipal side of the house, we've really been looking at additional staffing for a number of departments that we've been trying to work on for a number of years. And I'll go through a list of some of those needs that we'll be looking at, and you may see in the budget documents coming through in the next couple of months. First, we're looking at a town engineer position, really to work within the DPW. The net cost of that would only be probably a partial salary, since we'll be able to reduce the expense line items in that department. But we feel that an in-house town engineer will not only be operationally a much better model, but will actually save money in the long run. So we are looking at that. We're also looking at additional full-time DPW laborer for the DPW moving forward. The study that was done a number of years ago showed that we were several personnel below the recommended level, so we are going to be looking at that. And last year, we tried to get through some additional staffing for the Council on Aging and the Senior Center, so we'll be looking at additional staffing in that department. Currently, we have a part-time IT director. We will be looking at trying to make that a full-time IT director. There are a number of initiatives we'd like to move forward with, e-permitting, and really improving our website and other IT systems. And we think that a full-time IT director is the way to go to get that moving. Also, we're looking at possibly having a full-time benefits administrator for the town. I think we've made great strides in the human resource area, but we're finding that a centralized benefits administrator, and that position is more of a data input and someone to be able to track all the benefits for the employees and help onboarding of employees. So we're also, we always look at the public safety staffing. There may be some additional discussion along those lines, but that's still preliminary. And those are the key items that I just wanted to put forward tonight. Not necessarily an exhaustive list, but some of the ones that have consistently been discussed and that you may see come forward in this budget process.
In terms of the benefits administrator, would that be for the town departments only, or would that include the school?
That would include the school. That would be the entire town.
And
Same
what about
question
the
for IT?
Yeah.
No, the IT would be the municipal IT. The
Only?
school has its own IT department that's separate. So this would, essentially, we have one 20-hour per week IT director who we share with the town of Norfolk. And if we do go forward with this, we would look to possibly have that person work full-time here.
Is there capacity at the school? Or would it be more efficient to increase staffing at the school part-time to help with to get the most efficient solution?
Like we do with the maintenance staff.
Correct.
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, we couldn't do it with the current staffing.
Yeah.
Because we even have IT needs
It's
on
an
our own.
employee or contract?
Ours are employee.
Our employees.
Okay, all right.
And we have, I think we have a couple part-time, but mostly full-time. But that's a conversation we could have, but I can tell you right now, with our current staffing as is, we could not do it.
I understand.
Just as an aside, the gentleman we have here at Town Hall, Jim, is terrific. He's in-house, which is invaluable, and he does a lot of grants, and he gets a lot of grants, so he wants to come here full-time, if that matters.
Just a question for Mr. Kaczynski. What type of engineer is the DPW looking for?
We're still looking at that. Certainly a civil engineer is quite common, but we're keeping an open mind. We think, we'd like a kind of as much of a generalist as we can get, because certainly in municipal engineering it is a broad range, but.
Right, because I could imagine having a specific engineer, you'd struggle to find 40 hours for that employee.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to
They were
eliminate
silent.
the need for outside engineering, because there are a lot of specialties in engineering, but it will, we could take a lot of the consultant time away, which is, you certainly pay a premium for, if we had a full-time person here to handle that. And also, there is a benefit of having someone that is ultimately answerable to the town and not to the corporate headquarters of whatever engineering firm they work for.
Thank you.
So this engineer, just as another FYI, as you know, people come to the planning board, developers, and they pay for all the engineering that the town does, peer review, right? And we use, who do we use, Kathy?
Beta.
The group, Beta. Beta.
Beta?
They charge thousands of dollars an hour. With our town engineer, I mean, it's not gonna eliminate Beta, but for the small jobs, certainly, especially inspections and things like that, we bill it out. We bill out our engineer, substitute Beta. We bring in income, and it pays our engineer's salary 1,000 times. That's how much our costs are, right?
Yeah, it's also the Conservation Commission.
That's
We
right.
pay a lot of money to Beta.
It'd be nice.
And, yeah, it's just volunteers trying to do our best on small jobs, and
It'd be
a
nice to
lot
get
goes
an
through the
engineer
cracks.
With some Concom experience,
Yeah.
possible?
Mr. Chair, the DPW employees, Mr. Kaczynski, are they for the highway department or the general, or?
They'd be under the general fund
General?
for the DPW labor,
Thank you.
yes.
no further questions or comments. Looks like on the tip of anybody's tongue. We're going to keep going. Seniors. So I think all of us may have put this on the agenda. You know, I don't know what the town is going to do, what any of us are going to do in terms of follow-up to whether it be senior center. Certainly was the desire for some of us, for me personally, that, you know, it wasn't meant to put a nail in the coffin for a new council on aging. You know, that was the intent of a motion to refer, to signal that there is support for a council on aging. Didn't work, turned into a debacle, right or wrong, but that was the intent, and that was what was described in the discussion. It got lost because, you know, passions were, people felt very strongly about it, and hopefully people listened, but nonetheless, I mean, I think we all know what happened at town meeting. And I'm not looking for anybody to signal, hey, we're going to bring this back up or not. You know, that's, again, for the bodies to decide what they're going to do. But this is a very broad topic, so that's what I have to say on the seniors and senior center, and I would encourage others that wanted to talk, you know, the seniors, you know, please feel free.
I attended the senior luncheon, and they had a capacity, they could only seat 65 people. And the tables were so close to one another in that room downstairs. And I felt so badly for everyone there because there was no room for anything. And it was wonderful that the police and the fire department sponsored it, but we do need something more for the seniors. So I'm hoping that they approach us with a better, if they're going to come back to us, that they approach us with a better budget, more realistic or more ideas, because it was sad. It was sad the other day.
I think it's not just a senior center, it's also staffing, you know, and what services we can provide. So, I mean, yeah, things went sideways on the discussion of the senior center, but I think there needs to be more holistic discussion of what are the services that we are lacking in, and what are the staff that we currently have, and where are they over capacity?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman? Oh, maybe, one point. We're trying to decide if Ellen's mic's working, but I'll speak whilst, yeah. I think that the senior center is one side of it. The other side is, as Jody was saying, it's programs. And it can't be just more programs between 9 and 4. I mean, we're talking about whatever percentage of our town being over 60. Well, people over 60 and less than retirement age can't get there at 4 o'clock. Otherwise, you know, we're working. So I think that we have to look broadly and beyond the walls of the senior center until a solution is found. I think that looking broadly and beyond the walls has to include evenings, it has to include weekends, and it can't be this 9 to 4 or 9 to 2 job. It's got to be staff that are willing to work nights and weekends as we bring them in. But we'll talk about this a lot more at the select board meeting when we bring them in. But I have no issue saying, yeah, I'll share, probably share. But I have no problem saying we have to find more money for it, but it has to be for something new and innovative. It can't be the status quo.
Correct.
It can't just be adding one more person that's down there from 9 until 4, 9 until 2. And I know the school, when they're not in session, has space that can be used. The problem is, if you're only running a program from 9 to 2 or 9 to 4, the school's in session. So those are the things that have to be addressed and looked at. Library, school, other areas, but again, it's going to be staffing, and it's going to be staffing that's not more of the same. It's going to have to be something different.
Well, it would be nice if perhaps we could talk to Holliston and Sherburne and see if maybe we could regionalize some way as well. Because I know that they're also in need of senior centers. But also, as you say, Craig, utilize our own buildings. I'm not saying that we need to build another senior center, but we have to utilize our space better and find spaces for them. That room downstairs for lunch was just too teeny for them. That's all.
So one of the next steps that the COA is looking at, because then they haven't given up on a new senior center. In answer to your question to Holliston, I contacted Holliston. They're not interested. They're happy with their building, which is hilarious because it looks terrible. But anyway, which I told them that, so that didn't help our needs at all. I'm kidding. So the next step would be to go back to the architect, because in studying the plans, it appears to me, anyway, that most of the money was spent on the rehab here at the VMB. And so the short shrift that was given to the floor plan and the facade didn't help the Cassidy Farm option. So I think we go back to the architect and take a look at Cassidy Farm and maybe take another look at this building. But so the COA hasn't given up. They plan on moving forward with something, hopefully, in the spring, but it will be in collaboration with other boards, et cetera, so that we can get maybe the whole town behind it.
I think that this really brings into focus the need we have for a 5 to 10 year budget outlook. A new senior center wouldn't really have an impact for 2 years. So we need to be looking at really what the long-term numbers are. I've seen there are some published revenue projections, but we need to put together really a 5-year minimum, probably 10-year budget plan that would give us a lot of guidance.
We did have a plan, and I know that you've seen it ran out for 5 years. It had 10 years worth of columns, but I thought anything after 5 was scary to look at. So, but it went out 10 years on it with revenue and cost estimates. And that's where we ended up at the 4% growth magic number. Now, I was the first to admit right now I was radically wrong on my new growth estimates. They were far in excess of my numbers. So that just makes it even more realistic to look at this and see what we've got.
Yeah.
But I think so it does exist, and I think we can dust it off and bring it back out
Right.
again and go through it. But I think completely lost my train of thought. Oh, I think talking about the Cassidy Field or this building renovation, I wasn't opposed to the Cassidy Field, but it wasn't my first choice. This building had issues as well. If we're putting this back out there, I'd like to consider possibly the Braun property. I had issues with the look in the Cassidy Field. It's a wide open space with a large building come out of it. That doesn't have to be decided tonight, but I just want to put it out there as we're talking about it. If we're looking for a standalone greenfield development site like Cassidy was, and that was the advantage of it that the PBC saw, possibly the Braun, possibly others that aren't right as you're driving into town in a field with no trees, no shading, no anything separating it from the rest of the world. And the Braun didn't exist as a town-owned property when we started. So now that we're going back to reconsider it, let's reconsider.
Well, much as what we talked about last night in the MBTA 3A meeting, we don't necessarily want all of our town services spread out over a large area either. You know, there's some advantage to having things within a town center. You know, a lot of our more frail seniors, they don't drive. So then you've got wear and tear on vehicles and, you know, trying to deal with public transportation to get seniors to the senior center. But if we can try to aggregate more of our services, that's why I like this building, but I don't like this building as well. I like the location, but, you know, the building itself is tough to work with. But are there other parcels that we could identify that would possibly work? I would definitely be supportive of something that kind of puts it closer to where the seniors are actually living.
And full disclosure, I liked this building from the start as my first choice for all the reasons you enumerated. The cost unknowns were the reason the Permanent Building Committee was hesitant. But
Sure.
yeah.
Would there be any possibility of selling Cassidy and utilizing the money there for rather than holding on to so much open space property, couldn't we sell that?
That's an item coming up.
It's coming up.
Ellen has now read the agenda.
The answer to your question on that, Joyce, is the Cassidy Farm. Half of it is permanent conservation restrictions. The other half was approved in town meeting for general municipal purposes. And I believe Mr. Kaczynski is trying to flush out the current definition of what that might or might not include.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, on the finance committee, when we purchased it, that was like my first or second year on the finance committee. And it was always discussed as school, police station, a municipal building of some type. But that's
Yeah,
20-plus years ago.
Right,
So,
but
yeah.
the warrant that approved it said it's for general municipal purposes. That's the exact language.
Yeah, and that was
And
always
whether or not that
understood,
includes some of the MSTA housing or other types of affordable housing, we don't know. But as of now, the only thing with that definition, unless we get clarification, that parcel could be used for is a municipal building.
Mr. Chair, if I might, has anyone looked into where the gas station is down and over is going to be an affordable housing proposal? Large one?
On the corner of Hammond and,
No, you mean across the street from Needham Coop?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's,
Has anyone thought to work with a private developer regarding a space for a senior center, even down by where Bada Bing's was? You don't need an entire
well,
senior
Bada Bing's
center.
is gonna be, it's already been done.
Yeah, that's.
He's building,
So there's
some-
no
he's building
general
housing.
open space for anything?
well, Bada Bing's is gonna be some commercial, some housing, and they're gonna put the media.
I didn't know if there would be like the room for the restaurant or something, but this one here, if you could.
No,
mean,
but I
heard
was-
he was talking about going underground for garage space and everything, so
I want to talk to him,
exactly. Ellen,
the
if
owner.
anybody-
I want to talk to him. I talk to him a lot. What would be phenomenal would be to buy
Exactly.
that back piece
Mhm.
and add it to this building.
Yeah.
It abuts this
And
building.
you could give him sewer in lieu
For
of that.
parking. So
Okay.
there's a lot of conversations to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Duffy, before Mr. Schultz,
Get up here.
you got to be aggressive,
You
Mr.
gotta get right in
Duffy.
there from Craig Schultz, you gotta just like, when he breathes, you gotta.
No, I
jump
was-
in.
I was-
Is it
I was
working?
done.
Is this working?
You and Ellen, poor Aaron has nothing.
Jim
asked.
Duffy, Exchange Street, Millis.
I'm done with this stuff.
For,
It's a Christmas miracle.
yeah, how about that?
This is working.
I hardly need it.
He looks
All I can
good.
say is, from people that have communicated with me for whatever reason, there is little appetite for a big expenditure on anything, period, knowing that we are facing a fairly significant price tag on a renovated high school, most likely a $6 million price tag on yet another PFAS plant. And an agenda item that's not on the agenda tonight is the Tri-County
Tri-County.
rebuild. And what is that going to entail? So I understand there's desire and a lot of people are empathetic with the situation of the senior center. It's managed to suffice for a number of years. I think that one of my advocates would say, let's come up with a facilities committee that can actually maybe go figure out what to do with some of the space and reuse it and maybe reorganize it. I have no idea. But this comes up a lot. I, put forward whatever propositions we want, but I'm just, the voice of the citizens are, there's very little appetite to spend a lot of money on another building or anything like that. I mean, it's just, we're pretty strapped as citizens in taxes. If you look at some of the metrics that I happen to find on one of our pages, we are a leader in all of the metrics of, tax per capita and a bunch of other things. I wish I found it before tonight. I'll try to go find it, but, we are in dire straits as a town, so.
Well, I think that's why I was hoping that we could sell property somewhere in town.
Well, look I'm all about cost takeout,
Yeah.
so.
If we could sell some properties, it would help the town.
That
I
just
just-
delays it.
I just want to say that, you know, I appreciate what you're saying, and I may even personally agree with you, but none of us speak for all of townspeople. These are all very difficult decisions. There's never going to be an option that will get, you know, much beyond, you know, 2/3 vote. I mean, everything's going to be close, and there's going to be people that have feelings on either side. And so these are all good discussions to have. No, and I didn't mean to imply that, but we do know that there are plenty of people that were and are for a new senior center. And that's why we have town meetings, and that's why we vote, and that's why we have the process, so.
Mr.
anyway.
Burby, I have no idea if there's a specific thing that we have a hand raised. Deirdre, do you have something?
It's just the mouse.
Oh, it's just the mouse. Okay, never mind.
That's why we need a full-time IT person.
Between a mouse and a hand.
It looks like a hand's raised. Okay, never mind. Carry
Something
on.
at Oak Grove Farm might have it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion, since
Please-
you've already
just
violated the
jump in.
agenda order? Why don't we continue with disposition of town assets, since we're already deep into that? And we've already begun taking things out of order.
I put that on there.
Yeah.
I would like to see us advance the ball down the field on what are we going to do with various town properties and assets. And it's not like I've been a long time, you know, this was important to me when I voted for purchase of the Braun property. I voted for purchase of the Braun property because I thought that the town, having forfeited its right to tax revenues for decades, ought to exercise its right of first refusal, purchase the property, and then decide what's right for the town versus the owner who didn't pay, rightly so, per the law, didn't pay taxes over that period of time. And I think we ought to do that purposefully with a schedule, with milestones. We ought to review, and the select board ought to vote and propose, and the rest of the town committees ought to do the same, and it ought to go to a vote sooner than later as to what to do. And I think that process ought to include the discussion that we all just had in terms of what is right for the town in terms of our other needs. Should we not only sell properties, should we make an offer to a neighboring and adjacent property that would be suitable for a senior center and use the revenue for something that we would want to disposition to purchase or trade? I mean, there are creative ways that the town can disposition its resources and assets to get what we need in the long term. Because the money is just not going to grow on a tree, but we have assets that, I mean, I haven't lived in town that long, and many of, like the train station and other facilities, there are, I mean, my personal opinion is that train station is never going to make it. It's never going to make the cut in terms of what we would spend our resources on, because there are trade-offs, there are priorities, and I'm not sure what would go below the train station. There's a $300,000-$400,000 bill just to put it in caretaker status. Then that just boards it up and preserves it a little bit. We have millions of dollars in deficits for a number of priorities, whether it be staffing at the school or staffing at DPW or town offices. The train station is never going to make the cut. I'm never going to vote for it. And I'm just one of 9 votes. I'm just one of 9 votes, but eventually we have to make decisions and let the townspeople vote on it rather than just inaction.
Well,
That's true.
a couple points. First, I see the train station and the Braun property as totally different entities. The Braun property is going to appreciate in value over the years, and Ellen knows more about this than I ever will. But I think she spoke in favor of it at town meeting. I got worried when you got up, but I wasn't sure which way it was going. But then she, I mean, you buy that. We didn't buy it for 1 year. I mean, this was bought as an investment property. If we sold it tomorrow, and suppose we sell it for $200,000 more than we paid for it, we basically just get that $200,000 and free up the debt service for 1 year.
But they all have potential. I know where you're going with
Yeah.
this. They have potential to bring in tax revenue, one way or another, whether it's low-income housing, whether it's senior housing.
It has that potential, but it also has, I mean, this isn't, And I look at it maybe differently. I look at it as, when you're running a town, you're not running it for your lifetime. If I owned that as property and I needed the money and I had an opportunity to make money off it, I'd probably sell it quickly. But I'm thinking about it for the select board, the finance committee, and the town 20 years from now, when it's appreciated in value, or they need a package treatment plant, or they need a place to put a senior center, hopefully before then, but they need something done with that property. At least it still exists in use. And at that point, it's worth some real money. And if they need to do more development and bring in more development, at that point, it makes sense to do it. Right now, putting 40 more homes on it is going to start butting up against. It's not going to tax, but our sewer capacity is going to become an issue again sooner rather than later. I'd rather take the time. I don't want to put artificial constraints on it. I want to take the time to think it through and decide what has to happen with it. It's not going to be a quick revenue maker for us. Train station, I somewhat agree with you. I worked for the trustees for a lot of years. We used to take old buildings that were nice, make them look beautiful on the outside, and you don't go in them. You know, it was like a piece of sculpture, you know, and that was it. You know, they looked good until we had the money someday to go into them. So there's ways you could do something that's less expensive, but still, that's a different discussion. This is an asset that will do nothing but appreciate over time, and in 10 years, the future people on this board, because I don't think I'll be here at that point on this board, will thank us. And I think the town will thank us when they have the opportunity. So I don't want to put a time frame on the Braun property. Cassidy was purchased, when it was purchased, there were 2 or 3 what they called finger lots that went into it, where it was a house, an open parcel, a house, an open parcel. I don't remember if there was another open parcel, but there were 2 or 3. And those were always designed at some point, if the town needed to sell those as one-off single-family homes. That was the discussion that was had when we bought it. Not sell the whole property, but just those going down, what road is that, Kathy? Island Road. Just going down the road, there are places where houses could go. Not anymore?
There's one.
There's one?
But that's also the access to the field.
Okay.
And I believe it's 40 feet.
Okay, I
And
think
there's
there were,
one on
I thought
Exchange
there were
Street.
3 or 4, 2 or
There are
3
2.
finger lots. I didn't think there were a lot.
There are 2.
Okay. So those were designed as sale properties 20 years ago. So I see that differently than I see the Cassidy Field also. I mean, that was bought for a lot of different reasons that I agreed with at the time, and I still agree with, in conservation and everything else. So I think that thinking about disposal of town assets, it's worth considering, but I don't think it's anything to rush at right now. I'd wait, especially in the Braun property, for years.
I'm not advocating for
Yeah.
doing anything with any specific property other than planning for and looking at what we should do with them comprehensively. What do we need? What is in the best interest of the town?
Yeah.
And not doing that by accident, not just sitting on all of these resources when we know that there are needs that the town has, whether it be for a senior center or low-income housing or senior housing. There ought to be a plan that gets voted on to say, this is what the town should do deliberately.
Before we can make a plan, we need to know what we have.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Well,
Is there a current audit?
That exists.
May I speak?
Yes, please.
2 things. First, really quickly, this is personal opinion. I don't believe it is within the scope of what a town should do to speculate on real estate. Now, that's just an opinion, and I'll leave it there. As to the town-owned property, there's a very extensive inventory of that's been done. There was a proposal made to the CPC to fund a study of all town-owned land. I forget the number of properties, but there were a whole lot of them. We had a bid on that. We had 2 bids. The cheapest one came in at $167, and the funding was not there. CPC would fund a portion of it probably, but they don't believe that their role is to fund studies. So what we have done, the Conservation Commission has scaled that down and found a way from our budget to get $10,000. And the Conway School of Landscape Design is going to be doing a study on 14 properties, including the Braun property, getting public input. That report is supposed to be done by April. We've got a core team overseeing that consists of Jim McKay, Wayne Clacko, Carol Hayes, and Peter Germain. All the public sessions will be advertised. I believe, this is my opinion, there really are not but 2 or 3 properties that the town could sell. One of them is a 1/4 acre lot. You know, there's no money there. But that should be sold. The town's owned that for almost 50 years. There's another landlocked parcel that has an access. Perhaps that could be sold. You've got the Braun property, and if you demolish the train station, you'd have that. That's not within the scope of this, but they will be looking at that, and we should have some feedback in April. That will at least give an objective voice of somebody that doesn't have a lot of baggage. So I think it's money well spent, and I appreciate the support of Carol Johnston and Mike Kaczynski in letting the Conservation Commission find a creative way to fund that and make that happen without coming out of general funds. So that has no budget impact, the way we're funding that.
That's good.
That's very creative.
Yes.
And that's what we need to be doing, finding more
Pretty
creative
good.
ways. Very good job.
Yep. Okay, next up, building maintenance.
Yes, we can speak to that. Hold on one moment.
Mr. Chairman, before I begin, I didn't know if there's any specific questions or if there was a specific focus area on this, or were we just talking about the municipal and school consolidation of facility maintenance?
It's a good starting point. Honestly, I don't remember who proposed this topic, so.
Okay.
And also the fact that you've already talked a little bit about it in terms of a town engineer, you may hit on it, but everybody has, not everybody, it's common to hear the theme, whether we're talking, you know, to our neighbors and our friends or whatever, or listening to people at town meeting or at public forum, oh, the town doesn't care for its buildings. I take issue with that. I think we do.
I do as well.
But we certainly could do better, and so I think that's why we should be talking about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for those watching at home that may not know, this past town meeting in May, after some extensive discussions between some of the municipal administration and the school administration, we did put together a plan to consolidate our facilities maintenance. We had a good opportunity in that we had some vacancies in staffing here to move ahead with a consolidated maintenance, which has been done by a number of towns in the area. And the maintenance is going extremely well. The work of Mr. Engler and his staff at the school has been extraordinary. We've had some of the best maintenance we've had in a long time. And, you know, we may need some tweaks next year in the budget, you know, and I've had some discussions with some of the school administration in regards to that, but we've been very pleased, and I think it's another example of good collaboration and cooperation in that area. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has in regards to that. And, you know, we do try hard to keep the town buildings in good condition. Obviously, the Lansing Millis building is a special case because it's been mothballed, but you know, all our active buildings, I believe, are very well maintained, and we try our best to protect the assets of the community.
If you don't mind. I think it has worked out well. It dragged out our custodian negotiations a little longer this summer because it was a new process. I do agree with Mr. Kaczynski. I think there's probably going to be a little bit of tweaks. I don't think the budget impact would be significant, but I think we need to get through the first year, and more importantly, I think we have to get through the first winter. So if and when we do get snow, how that will impact, because we have to worry about schools and getting them open in the town building. So I think we've planned for the contingencies, but until you actually do it, it remains to be seen. But I think we're very, very close to having the right staffing. I think it's just going to be a question of what does it actually look like after we do it for 8 or 9 months. And in fact, I believe we took on 2 additional buildings that were not agreed upon in the initial kind of agreement, which has worked out, but that will factor into what it looks like. But I'm not seeing a significant budget impact, but I want to leave it open to have an additional conversation after we get close to the first year done.
Steve, which were those buildings?
The building, we took on a part of the fire station, not all of it,
It might have been the DPW.
and the DPW. So we had the library.
The new DPW office building, I think was the
We
one.
had the library was part of it. The police station with some close coordination with the chief and his staff. And Niagara Coffee House when there is an event. And even on the library, so when they're running stuff in the afternoon, we ran basically Monday through Friday, and our custodians worked on the weekend when there was an event, and it was overtime pay. So we're adjusting schedules accordingly and negotiating, but I personally, from the feedback that we've gotten from John and Terry and the superintendent, it seems to be moving and working in the right direction. And going back to the earlier conversation, I think that could be an example for how the IT, maybe an IT collaboration works initially as well. So we from the big picture, we want to make sure we're working collaboratively and working together with limited resources to get the most for our limited dollars.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the other building maintenance that we're doing, being honest, when they built the old library, when they built the old Clyde Brown School, we had a track record of building cheap and not maintaining, which is a dangerous combination. You can't build a very inexpensive building and not spend a fortune on maintenance. If you're going, so what we've done now is we've got the capital planning committee, which is looking at maintenance. When we came up with a $10 million maintenance bill for the high school, the roof and the boilers, people were shocked that we had an $8 to $10 million maintenance bill. But that's maintenance. That happens every 25 years or so with a building. So you can't be upset when we put together a $10 million estimate for maintenance and say that's because we haven't done maintenance.
8 to 12.
8 to 12?
8 to 12.
Well, on the capital planning committee, it was a $10 million line item as a placeholder. So, but still, that number was seen by a lot of people as an indication that we don't do maintenance. It's no. For 25 years, you don't touch the roof. Then you spend $2 million. For 25 years, you don't touch the boiler. Then you spend $6 or $7 or $8 million. That's just maintenance. What we've done now is with the capital planning and the quality building, this Clyde Brown's got a steel roof that's got a 50-year warranty. We're not going to have the roof leaks that we had with the old Clyde Brown when we kept patching together. The old library, if any of you remember it, we couldn't use it with a heavy snow load because the roof buckled, you know, and we were afraid of collapse. The new library, steel roof again. We've taken these steps to make the new buildings useful, and with a long life. And we've also taken the next step of knowing, to John's point, that I think it goes out to that, when we have to replace the HVAC at the library, which is not soon, but it won't be cheap when it has to happen, but it could be 20 years out. And we escalate that up with cost estimators, you know, each year, cost escalators. So those are all things that we're doing differently than we've done before. I totally agree. 20 years ago, building cheap, not maintaining, because we were in a position we had no money for maintenance. Now we have a plan in place to prioritize and do it. So I think we're in a different place. I'm getting a little tired of hearing we're not maintaining our buildings, because I absolutely agree we did maintain our buildings. We did not maintain our buildings, but now we are.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think things have changed.
Right, but the other kind of big thing on it was that each building was responsible for themselves, and depending on their priorities, there was no schedule, there was no system. So now you go through, each one's got a plan. We've changed filters on this day at the library. We go filters on this. Plus saving money, hopefully, we'll be starting to consolidate and using the same vendors, right? That's the goal.
Right.
That's all.
So I think it's getting better.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll add as well that, you know, we brought up the Lansing Millis building. Through discussions with our state legislative delegation, we were able to secure $250,000 in funds through the recent state bill for the repair and work on that building. So we do now have some funds from the state to do some work. It's not going to be enough to do everything we need, but it would certainly help us and get it to a position to stop the building from deteriorating.
Wow,
So-
that's great news.
How much money do we need to refurbish that building?
We did have, well, we don't know for the full refurb, and some of it depends on how it's going to be used. The Permanent Building Committee, I think, did look at that, just the cost to really fully mothball the building, to stop any, to close the envelope, is in the vicinity of $400,000. But an interior renovation could be well over $1 million.
There's a $2 million line item in the capital.
Okay, we're going to move on to, unless there's any objections, I'm just trying to keep us going. The capital planning resource budget, software and training. I advocated for this after some discussion at the capital planning committee, and we've been talking within the capital planning committee for the last couple years that the capital planning committee needs to graduate. It needs to grow up and have additional resources. Everything is done by spreadsheet. That is not the way that any enterprise that owns millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in resources and assets, whether they be roads, infrastructure, facilities, it's not how it's done. And where the capital planning committee chairman has done a fantastic job and has not asked for anything really. He's gone above and beyond, and so have several others that have been on that committee to support him. But it's time for that to have some resources, whether that be, there's variety of software. There's some software that's compatible with what the town already uses. There's other commercially available software. The ask is that, and I'm not sure what the dollar figure is, but that ought to be a request that is considered in this upcoming budget cycle for software, hopefully with training, so that it can be used effectively. The last thing we want is software that we don't know how to use. And in most cases, it includes that's included in the price. So for your awareness, I think I can't speak for what the capital planning committee will do. I'm not on the capital planning committee anymore, but Mr. Lohr, I suspect, will come back and talk with the finance committee, and I think Mr. Schultz and Mr. Conroy. Hopefully they'll let you know what that number is. But I solicit your support and ask for any comments you have.
I agree with you. I remember when I was on the capital planning committee that, it's a little bit insane, not even a little bit, extremely insane that everything's being tracked by spreadsheet. So I do think some form of a software program is a requirement and definitely something we should look at.
Yeah, and I would think having something that can tie in with the town software would help mitigate some of that data entry. Because, putting all of that data into a new program is daunting.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping it up to date, if it's wrong, and, that can be hard to catch. But if it can just be imported from town data, that can save the volunteers a lot of time.
Yeah, we'll absolutely have to take it under advisement when we get a price, and then but it's going to require training a town staff member to run it also, because we're not going to train a volunteer to be the sole person that knows how to work it.
Otherwise,
you just signed up for that committee until you're dead.
There could be a budget implication there in terms of there is admin support to that committee. I'm not sure that there's adequate hours, just for instance.
Yeah, we'd have to figure that whole thing out. So
While Mr. Duffy's coming to the microphone, another advantage of having a town, the existing software integrate with whatever is used is that there's a capture of costs that when there's a facility problem, a facility repair, facility maintenance costs, all those costs should flow into any type of cost accounting and cost tracking so that you can capitalize accordingly. So, Mr. Duffy.
Yeah, Jim Duffy, Exchange Street. So, if I recall correctly, the DPW received approval for an asset management package. Is it leverageable?
We believe it is. That's what we're referring to. We believe it's called JobWorks, CityWorks, CityWorks.
So it's an extension of that potentially?
We
Or-
hope that it would be, yes.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
I don't know the name of it. Beyond, that module, I don't know what that's called.
It's
So there might be
CityWorks.
another module
Thank
that
you.
goes on top of that. All right, great, thank you.
None seen or heard. FY '24 budget timeline and process. The Finance Committee, really all we have to say is sooner, faster.
Do you guys have this,
We do
Okay.
have the handout in front of us.
okay.
We started tonight. You have our preliminary.
Thank you. Salvo.
Exactly, that's exactly how I would describe it.
And we have a whole full day scheduled on February 6th. And by whole day, we're talking 8-hour day, meeting with department.
So maybe we'll, get us through this, I'm going to read through it. So the 16th would be the budget templates get sent to the departments, 16th of December, today, tomorrow. Budget, thank you. Budget templates back to the finance office, to Ms. Johnston and staff, mid-January, 13th. Administrative meetings with department heads to review. That happens 23rd of January to the 3rd of February. Select boards meet with department heads on the 6th of February. Finance Committee does same on the 14th and the 28th, or to the 28th, so that'd be 3 weeks. Followed by, in March, the Finance Committee does it again, likely because there would be changes based on feedback received from the Select Board and from the Finance Committee. And then the month of April is for preparation of the budget, and I'm sure further refinement in the month of April, leading up to town meeting on May 1st. Any comments or questions? And Deirdre, if you have anything in terms of timeline, what that looks like for some of our milestones. I see that the 21st is in there.
I know that.
So actually,
Go, Deirdre.
final recommendations will be made April 12th. We'll go to print on April 17th in order to have the report delivered to the residents on the 24th.
So the mailing date would be the 24th.
Well, we'll go to print on the 17th.
And when is it delivered?
24th.
I have one question on, when will we have a revenue estimates, preliminary, obviously preliminary, but like the taxation and those estimates? Okay, thank you.
What, Craig, when do we have those?
Mid-January.
Mid-January for revenue estimates for FY '24.
So, just on our end, we've started our budget conversations, and it really picks up in January and February. I would propose, even though we will be coming before the FinCom with our budget, after it's more formalized, I propose we do another tri-board meeting after we get the projected revenue, right? Because that's a lot of what we're talking about tonight and what we're starting to talk about. Until we have real numbers, or what we think is close to real numbers, it's just speculation. I think when we have a more definitive idea what the money looks like, I think we should circle this group back together. I know that this group we can talk as individual boards to each other, but I think that there's a benefit to having this kind of forum with the give and take, so we can hear what the big picture looks like. That's just my thought.
When did you propose for that?
I really would wait on when we have the revenue.
I would say mid-February is what I would think.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Mr. Catalano, when
Yes.
will you have the final numbers for the the sped costs?
I think we're probably close after the first of the year.
Okay,
I think we'll have the tuition cost, whether what our enrollment looks like may not be set right away. I think we'll know what the schools will be charging after the first of the year. I think we're close right now, but we should have it after the first.
And does it lock in April for the new
I don't
kids
know.
coming in?
I don't want to give an answer for that. I suspect that it has to lock
I
at a
thought it was
certain
locking
point.
at April, as far as I recall from
Well,
previous
I can
years.
confirm that.
Yeah.
so what do we say, early February? Mid-February? Mid-February?
I think so.
Okay.
Ms. Johnson, when is it somewhat, I mean, it's relevant, but it's not a deciding factor, but when is free cash? Or do we already know that? We're just
We already know.
living off of our balance from?
Right, we're living off the balance that we
Okay.
had from last year.
Okay. How about, Mr. Kaczynski, how about Form 7 capital requests? Where does that fit in? Again, not part of the operating budget, but still germane to this process.
Yes, those capital forms go out with the budget forms, so we should have all capital requests back in again by 13th of January.
So I'll just ask that, that this form be given to the capital planning committee, and then we roll them into the process as well.
Very well.
Okay, anybody have any complaints with meeting again on mid-February? I mean, I second it, not that we're gonna vote on it, but I think it's a good idea,
I
in
think
favor
it's
of it.
helpful.
Do we want to try to set a date now?
Yes,
While we're all here?
yes, we do.
Okay.
Keeping in mind school vacation. Yeah.
None for us.
Vacation's canceled this year.
Oh, I don't know, do you guys know when that is? Off the top of your
It's
heads?
normally around the holiday. We'll have to look at the calendars.
Gotta
I
be the
usually
20th.
have it in here because it's a big
Starts the
thing.
20th.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right, so
so the week before that, maybe?
Valentine's
say the
Day is not on a
16th?
Wednesday?
No, we could do the Wednesday, the 15th, if that doesn't impact you guys.
Doesn't affect us.
Yeah,
February 15th?
February 15th works.
Are we locking in February 15th?
Pencil it in.
All right.
Pen it in.
I won't be here, but
Typing
that
it
doesn't
in.
matter.
All got our techniques. Put it under the town calendar, not the Y calendar.
In Zoom. Where you're not going?
I'll be in,
This is not
I'll be
telling.
the other side of the world,
Oh.
so.
So it'll be in the
a little
morning.
inconvenient.
It's fine.
Yeah, super fun having it.
All right, sorry. Okay?
Putting it down for
If-
an hour and 45 minutes.
I just encourage us to look a little closer. This was a cursory discussion of the schedule. I consider it, and we need to dive into the details and give each other feedback, between now and February, so that we can keep it going. Okay? That is the budget timeline and process. We'll add in here pre-town meeting and some other items as well. Okay? Timeline process, we already talked about marijuana impact funds. MSBA timeline refresher, please.
So thank you again to the town for voting in favor of the feasibility study at town meeting, and for the support of all of the boards here tonight. The school building committee is a group of individuals that were appointed by the select board. That group met last week, and first milestone is to select a owner's project manager selection subcommittee, which was proposed and done last week, and are starting that selection process in January. That typically takes, based on the requirements of the MSBA, that'll probably take us about 2 months to get to completion of that. And once the owner's project manager comes on board, then thankfully they sort of take the reins and lead from that point forward. And the town and the school building committee are all strong stakeholders in the process. Following the owner's project manager selection, then we move to selecting the design firm. And the design firm, once selected, we're probably looking, I did some rough estimates, probably April, May. Then once they are selected, then they really start doing the meat of the work of the feasibility study. They'll meet with members of the district, come up with educational plans, do facility studies, come up with facility plans, do traffic studies, environmental studies, site evaluations. All of the things that are outputs of the process are really led by the design firm. They bring in all of the appropriate subcontractors. This entire process will take us somewhere between 18 to 24 months. So far, thanks again to the citizens of Millis, we are officially ahead of schedule because technically we had until the end of March to approve the feasibility funds. So getting that approval in November gives us a little bit of a head start, if you will, on the process. So school building committee meetings are open to the public. We are likely going to be doing them on Zoom, so they'll be published. Please join us on Zoom. If you have any questions, just let us know, but that's sort of where we are right now, and kind of the high-level milestones of what we're tracking to at this point.
Denise, can I ask you, I remember when Clyde Brown started, there was a lot of, that's actually right when I moved to town, there was some public participation in, I think, the process, you know, the programming that the school offers and what is desired out of the program.
Yes.
When does that happen on this? What is it called?
So that will be run by the design firm, and it's part of the educational planning. So there's a couple of different checkpoints where the town can provide their feedback. They will, if it's in keeping with the process that we went through with Clyde Brown, they will do surveys of the community to say, like, what program would you like to see? So it goes out in survey form. They meet with all of the educators in both portions of the building. They'll do some community outreach as far as from an educational perspective. What would you like to see as part of your educational program in the town? Then when there are options for what the final product will be, then there are multiple forums soliciting feedback on, here are the options that we've come up with, what's your feedback, what do you like, what do you not like, and then those are taken and that feedback is taken, and then there's a vote by the school building committee as to which option that we would put forward to the town. In the last project, that had a lot of public input and participation, and the school building committee, the way that it was run in the past, and I imagine it will be so in the future, is really everybody's voice was heard. There may only be 5 voting members, but everyone's feedback was really taken into consideration. So there'll be a lot of forums once the options are at that stage.
Okay. I know that the Owners Project Management Selection Committee and the MSBA committee are prescribed. You know, who's on that is prescribed. What is the opportunity, when will the Finance Committee have an opportunity to participate, whether, even if it's, we need to put somebody from the MSBA on our agenda to get an update? And the reason I ask is, candidly, because we took some criticism during the Council on Aging discussion that we were late to the party.
Oh, sure.
And so I'd like to avoid that.
Sure. We come up with whatever cadence we think works well. I think once we get into anything that so it depends how much you want to know. But I would say anything that starts to have some dollars and cents associated with it, if you want us to come once a month and give you an update as to where we are on that, happy to do that. But we can certainly come and give you updates as to where we are in the process, or if you want to start earlier, that's fine as well. A member of the Finance Committee could sit on the School Building Committee if they would like.
As just a
non-voting member.
Non-voting member.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that flexibility, so.
We talked at our last meeting about assigning some reps to various committees, and I'm pretty sure that was one of them. So that is kind of the ask.
Yeah.
I anticipate that we will do that.
Mike, what's the date today? Sorry, the date today is the 15th. My only request would be, we have some timelines that we have to adhere to when we make changes to the school building committee. So we have some changes that are going to be going up to them after the next select board meeting, because the select board appoints the members of the school building committee. When that changes, we have a 20-day time period where we're allowed to send that back up to the MSBA. So if there is somebody in mind, and I think we might still be in the open meeting law time period of putting somebody on the select board agenda for appointment, because it's Wednesday?
It's Thursday.
Oh, it's Thursday, forget it, sorry. I was thinking it's Wednesday. Okay, so we
So
can
was
still
Joyce,
make.
actually.
Yesterday was
vague enough, though? I don't know if the item's
You have
vague
it-
enough
you
for us
have
to
it on the agenda.
We
We
do.
have
Appointment.
appointments to the permanent
we
building,
add someone
else?
not that, but the school,
Yeah,
yeah.
you could add a
I think we can
person.
probably fit that.
I'm probably going to keep us back and discuss it amongst the committee, and maybe we'll vote a nominee, and we'll communicate it as fast as possible.
And they can be on the committee, they can attend all the meetings without being appointed. And if it's anything like the last one, the 5 people that are the official voters vote, but everybody else is heard.
Yeah, because it's open
Yeah.
to the public, so anybody could still sit in.
No, I understand.
you know.
I think the reality is the piece that where the budget may even start to be somewhat discussed, we're months away from that.
Sure.
I mean,
You're
it
right.
really is, we gotta get the owner's project manager, then get the design firm, and then we're months away from them even coming back to start looking at options. So,
I
I'm
think
not
it's-
saying that you can't be part of it, but
Mhm.
I just think, I don't think there's such a rush to it, because I think truly we're 6 or 7 months away.
I'm not looking to interject ourselves prior to it being appropriate. My only comment to what you just said is that it is prior to budget, it's actually during scope discussions, just so we know how we got there, how, when we start talking dollars and cents.
We're not even at that point.
No,
yet
no,
with
I
scope,
understand,
but-
I understand you're months away, but I don't want to wait until there's a cost estimate for us to start listening. We ought to be listening and attuned to what's happening so that we have the background of how we got to what's being estimated.
That's fair.
That's all. Anybody else? Okay. Wow, that's fantastic. Mr. Catalano owes me a Diet Coke. We didn't bet.
Yes, you do.
We bet.
I have several
Mr.
questions.
Mr.
Several
Duffy.
questions.
Mr. Duffy.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm fairly new, very new to the whole participation in the town meetings and whatnot, but.
No, you're not, because you've been to 20 times more meetings than most of our residents and neighbors.
Yeah, and that's sad in some ways, that there aren't more people here to do that. But one of my viewpoints would be, I would actually advocate that the town hold a town hall meeting. My perspective is most of the meetings don't really have participation from the town. They're agenda set. The town meetings are very agenda set, select boards, et cetera, et cetera. I would advocate that a town hall of all of these boards, for example, might be very beneficial, at least once a year and maybe twice a year. I would think upcoming, maybe April-ish, you might have an idea of the mood of the town and have some solicitation on town opinions on a number of matters that seemingly just don't get voiced well. They get voiced, but not, I don't think a lot of people hear them, and that may be my misperception there.
I'm going to ask.
We don't do that here that I've seen, so.
I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Mr. Gazinski to comment. I'll just tell you that the state law prohibits much of what you're talking about.
Does it really?
Open agenda, I don't know the exact words, and that's why I'm going to the expert. We typically are not allowed to have open discussion or on our agendas, new topics, old topics, even those sometimes are frowned upon. But please, before I dig myself into a hole, Mr. Gazinski.
Yes, I would say that you'd at least want some general topics, so you'd want to find out what types of things people want to talk about and put broad topics, as long as the boards present aren't going to take any actionable votes at that meeting. You can put some broad topics to have general discussions.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd want to make sure that you couch that in a broad way and don't plan to take any action that night, and then be follow-up for any boards afterwards.
Okay. We will do that. We'll take it under advisement.
And it may be a presentation of progress on items that may have come up at town hall or been voted on, or kind of where are we on that, or,
Okay. I'll just mention that at least one of the, well, all 3 of our select board members always make themselves very accessible. One of them is usually at Country Kitchen and is talking to neighbors. Another one holds official office hours. Another one is on the public forum more than anybody else I know, and he's the best source of information in town.
I appreciate that. Along those lines, evening office hours would be welcome for some of us who can't get there during the day. And Avelina's, I know, is a forum as well.
I agree with I agree with you, and we can always do better with outreach and pushing of information and updates than we do. We can always do better, so, okay. Ms. Garzon is going to talk real briefly on MBTA.
Yeah, in the interest of taking advantage of having us all here. So we had our MBTA 3A Communities meeting last night. We are working with MAPC, who is really doing kind of the heavy lifting because none of us has the time to crunch the data and review GIS maps in detail and all of that. So we're working with them. We will be having a public forum coming up February, I believe. We're trying to nail down a date. This will be.
I think we talked about February 15th.
No, we did not.
We did talk about February 15th.
Just, I knew that.
Where was that information 5 minutes ago?
But we didn't set the date, so it's not on my calendar. And this is why I was like, you know, you gotta set a date. So we will be, you know, spreading the word about what we'll be talking about. For those who don't know, we have to find kind of zoning parcels that we will allow somewhat dense or denser multifamily building by right. And that's a requirement from the state. Otherwise, we don't yet know what will happen, but they're saying they're going to take away money from different sources, including the housing authority, weirdly. Yes, which, you know, they'll use whatever carrots and sticks they have. Right now, they're only talking sticks. But we, you know, so we're looking at 50 acres of developable land, 750 units by right. That doesn't mean that 750 units would be built in a year or 10 years or 20 years, but that the zoning has to allow for it. So we have a good committee, 9 people. You know, we're looking at the zoning maps, discussing areas where that amount of density could work. It'll impact taxable parcels, it'll impact schools, sewer, you know, open land, you name it. So everyone's participation is really important, and at least for everyone to understand kind of what this is, and not at the last minute when you look at a zoning map and you say, wait a minute, you know, that's terrible. No, this needs to be a process as we go along. So the meeting will be sometime mid-February.
Does the edict to get to the density that's being specified negate any of the other requirements, whether they be, you know, sewer capacity or any other zoning? I mean, what takes precedence?
It wouldn't negate sewer capacity.
No.
Sewer capacity is a hard stop. I mean, there's a limit, and we don't know what that is. You know, there's discussion
Right,
of
no,
that,
I understand.
But once we hit that limit, no more, we wouldn't issue sewer permits. Zoning can be changed by the town to do that. Nicole Riley's our expert on that one. But, you know, there's a lot of things to it. But it would basically allow a higher density construction in certain areas by right.
Which means reduction of setbacks and
Yeah,
all
those things to let it happen. And it would probably be done as an overlay district, so the underlying zoning exists, and Kathy knows more about this than me, so I'm trying to sound smart, but the underlying zoning still exists, but you can also do this, you know, so it gives you those options. It's still early in the process, and very, very early in the process. It's not going to be, we've gotten that far, it's not going to be a high-rise building. It's probably not going to be a mid-rise building. We've eliminated those two. It won't be a single-family lot on a house on a lot. It's something in between. You know, it's going to be higher density. It could be, you know, 3 homes in a block, or, you know, there's different ways to do it, but it's early. Yeah.
Super early, and, you know, we don't want to lose our commercial parcels, our industrial parcels, places where people can work, to have only housing. So looking at mixed use, looking at different things, and everyone's input will be really important. Even last night, you know, from the committee, we had suggestions on other parcels that they could look at or kind of reconfigure. So, and that's just with 9 people. So whatever input we can have that would be great. And we're talking about having it in, possibly over at the school, but we're looking at a good spot where people can, you know, feel free to speak up.
And the important point is, we just have to make sure it's legally available to do this zoning. We don't have to look at the feasibility, is there a sewer line to it? Is there any of that other stuff? It just has to be able to be done by a developer who would invest the money, time, and effort into doing it by right. And the goal is to comply, not to quickly encourage anybody to build 750 units in town.
109 in Medway?
That's not 750, that's
That's
less.
190, that's
Yeah,
scary.
yeah.
That's 3 of those.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Pete, you're gonna lose your bet.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
not,
gonna
my bet
stretch
is until 9:30. I still have, I have 30 minutes to go. That's what I was waiting for. Thank you. Second. Actually, Finance Committee, please table the motion.
I wanted to hear more about the software.
You bet.
I want to hear about sped.
Why don't we
just hang it on, buy him
a Diet Coke? How about that?
We're gonna not adjourn the Finance Committee for another 5 minutes.
Okay, so,
Second.
Robin, I'll make a motion we adjourn. Aye.
okay, second, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Select Board's adjourned.
School committee's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Good to
all.
see you. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah.
Really, I just wanted to discuss any statements of interest to serve on whatever capacity that ends up being for the School Building Association Committee and rep. So if there's anybody that wants to do it, please let us know, and then we'll go to nominations. So we're looking for somebody to volunteer to be our rep, the committee's rep on the School Board Association.
Anyone interested?
Go ahead.
I could potentially be interested, but I may have a conflict that, Pete, I'm hoping to talk to you about after the meeting, so.
Okay.
I would do it, but I probably won't have much time until April.
No.
Depends on what night they're meeting and how often.
Yes.
No, leave them here. Yeah, Deirdre will take care of those. Okay. Yeah.
A little bit more detail before I can even express interest on
Okay.
the meetings.
Okay.
Same as Pete.
Okay, so I'm going to defer. I want people to give some thought to it. We'll find out more. Unless somebody says, hey, I want to do it right now, we'll defer.
Yeah.
It sounds like we don't necessarily have to assign somebody. I was just going to take it as an opportunity, because we probably won't be meeting for at least another month. So,
It'll probably be a monthly meeting, right?
at least, at least, because there could be multiple meetings where we would have a rep to a committee. Maybe we assign 2, and then
Yeah,
the
but-
2 share the duties, but,
I think it would be important for a representative to be on that committee, though, so we don't have a senior project,
Right.
debacle again.
Right, right.
And have progress updates and
Right.
inform through multiple channels to the public of what's
Yeah.
going on.
It doesn't sound like there's much of a need to do that, though, until they engage the design firm. So, and that won't be until after April, so,
okay,
yeah,
all right.
I'll be happy. to
Now
do
I
it.
will take a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.